Say welcome to everyone. I'm really happy that we've got to week 4. This is probably my favorite week of the session because it's active, it's integrative, and it's going to really force everyone to think about their own personal situation. So this is where I really enjoy the conversation, and I want to encourage everyone to be engaged and ask your questions. Put them in the chat. We'll address them. If we think it'll take too long because your question's complicated, we'll be glad to take it offline and set up some time with you. But please do, if something pops in your mind, put it in the chat.
Yep. All right. Well, welcome to week 4. This is all about self-advocacy, and Sherry has a special personal blueprint for you all as well for 7 steps on how to personalize your neuroplasticity recovery. So let's get started with some housekeeping. And just a reminder, this is recorded. You probably got that notification for those joining us live. Replays will be available in the course portal, and you do have to register for that separately. Now, I want to say this even more importantly today. There is a lot of resources, workbooks, handouts that are in that course portal for you to go access. So you can scan this on your phone. If you're checking your emails, we've sent it via email quite a few times as well. And then if you have any questions throughout the session, we will have at moments where we'll ask if anyone has any questions, and having those in the chat is really going to help keep your questions top of mind right there. And then we are going to launch a pre-survey as well. And of course, much of what we're doing here is going to require homework. It's going to require time to work on these workbooks, think about these, make improvements. And so be sure to schedule time if you need to, or have that time delegated so that you can be working on this as well. All right. Sherry, if you want to start the overview, I'm going to launch the poll.
Yeah, that would be great. So, we've got a really great introduction and overview of self-advocacy. And if you've heard us say anything, you know that self-advocacy is a big piece of what we want to encourage you to do. So, we're going to talk through what the steps are there, how to do that, some practical tips, and where to consider using it. And then, as Izzy mentioned, we're going to walk through this blueprint workshop. Can't say that tonight. It's really personalized so that you can take what we've been teaching through the 4-week series, apply it to your unique situation, and come out with an action plan. And then lastly, there's some resources. So if you want to go and do a little more research, get more educated, we've got some recommended reading and some locations where we think you can find some good trusted info.
Perfect. All right, and as always, our disclaimer is to take this information to your care team, to have them as part of the process. And we're going to talk about that a lot more today, in how to present this information to them and what happens if maybe they're not hearing you, and how to deal with that as well. So let's dive into our self-advocacy portion. And really here, this is really about you being able to confidently communicate with your healthcare and potentially insurance providers to be able to ask those informed questions so that you can get the clarity. And as you, so we've got someone on, there we go, get it on mute. As you're able to do that, you really begin to be actively a part of your care team, instead of passively being there and allowing other people to take care of you. Now, we understand that sometimes that is the situation. So this might also be for your caregiver. And so you might be a caregiver here or the receiver. And being able to speak up for your loved one and being able to ask the right questions, right? It makes the entire process much more active, rather than just feeling like we're just passively going by. So what we're going to be covering in this section today is preparing for the appointments, maintaining records, and we do have some little workbooks that you can help track all of that a lot easier. how to analyze the data, build those partnerships, ask questions, and then knowing your rights and leveraging support. So we do have a couple of resources as well that there are support groups and resources to help with transportation depending on where you're at. All right, so this is your body or your loved ones, right? Like you are going to know this far better about what's going on, what the symptoms are, what's happening during certain times of the day, far more than the care team generally will, unless we communicate that. And one thing Sherry and I mentioned was back in the day, right? There wasn't CT scans, there wasn't all of these blood tests. How did doctors do their work? Like Little House on the Prairie, right? They had to know the symptoms and they were listening to the symptoms. And so we have to communicate those because sometimes those symptoms are saying more than what a test can. Sometimes, right? And then there's other times where the tests are saying it or it can point us in the direction of a test. So being sure that we are communicating, and part of that process is going to be documenting your symptoms and what times of day you might be having symptoms. So we're going to talk about that here in a moment as well. But as we're moving through this, we also have to understand what might be holding you back from speaking up. Is it maybe you don't have enough knowledge in a certain area? Maybe you don't know the question to ask. And so also recognizing that so that you can be an even better advocate for yourself or your loved one. Knowing your rights. Now, this might vary from country to country, but as far as the US and most countries, this is going to be true, that you are entitled to clear explanations. You should have access to your medical records. I know, like here, I have my chart. I can go in and look at them. And sometimes the different doctors' offices are communicating in that way, but not always, right? Not always do they have access to all of those records. You also have the right to a second opinion. So you don't have to take the word of the first person that you hear these things from. Patient advocacy groups. So here are some of those patient advocacy groups. Feel free to take a photo. We can drop them in the portal as well. And then online support groups are very much present as well, right? We see Facebook groups. There might be some virtual Zoom meetings and things along that nature.
And Izzy, I want to call out the Patient Advocacy Foundation here because they do offer free case management. They're not always available. You do have to wait in line. As you can imagine, that's a very in-demand service, but that is something that's available if you've got a very complex situation, you need help with your insurance, you're really trying to understand what resources are available to you and what your rights are. Those guys have a phenomenal advocacy team themselves, and that's all they do. So they really know the ins and outs and can help guide you. And if you really feel like you need that extra help, I would certainly reach out to them.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's part of why we're here, the Neuroplasticity Alliance, is to help make sure that you know what's available, right? We get questions like this all the time. Can we help with this? And we don't, but we can point them in the right direction of here's an advocacy foundation. Right, so helping connect all of those dots. All right, so let's talk about organizing your health data. And so as we get started, we want to talk about how do you collect all of this information. Some of it, most of it nowadays is digital and it's available online, but even tracking what is online. The doctors aren't always in there looking at what all tests have been done. And again, if another office did it, they might not readily see it. So you being able to track these and finding a preferred way of tracking. So you might be the person who likes to have everything in a spreadsheet. Maybe you're the one that likes to have everything handwritten in a notebook. But having it all in one place where you can easily find it. Now, I typically do recommend a spreadsheet or a digital folder of some sort, because it's very easy to share that with a loved one who's supporting you. Maybe you've got a couple family members that are helping out. Maybe you want to email this to your nurse or healthcare provider. And so having those where you can send them can make that a lot easier. But you also might like to have them written down in the notebook too. I know I like to do both. That being said, things you want to track: timelines. Track relevant information for the incidents, of course, for your appointments as well. Knowing what tests, procedures, treatments, reports that you've had, and maybe what you might be requesting. Contact information. Maybe your phone dies. Maybe you need to send it to someone. Do you have that readily available that you can send? And then also medications and pharmacies, as well as what we're going to talk about in a moment with a symptoms diary. And these
And
are
Nancy, sorry, to make a note here, I do think it's real important for you to take time to look at all of the reports yourself. And so for me, that's why I prefer hard copies because I can flip back and forth very easily between the two or three or four, more likely, and to ensure there's consistency across them because finding that inconsistency or the consistency really helps narrow down what you want to do from an action standpoint and the questions you want to ask. So just the ability to analyze easily and across tools, I think, is something to keep in mind, regardless of what practice you like, digital or hard copy. But whatever it is, make sure that you can easily do that.
Mhm. Yeah, and depending on how long you've been going through this as well, right? Sometimes maybe we started when there wasn't my chart or the digital, and so having those, and maybe helping. Right? Well, sometimes we have to help the healthcare team too, so that they have all the information. That being said, there is, of course, my chart, as I mentioned. There is also Tidy Health, and then there's trackers. And of course, you can do this in a paper method or in a spreadsheet method. Maybe you're like, hey, today was a 1, and so I wasn't having a lot of pain, discomfort, whatever the symptom might be. Or maybe it's a 5. And so you can use these trackers like Bearable or Tally so that you can track that there. However, use what's available to you too. I use the notes section in my phone. I don't know about you all.
I'm pretty old school. I have a folder. I
Do
actually have a
you?
binder with all of my stuff in it, so I can flip through and take it out and spread it out and look at it all. I do have digital copies because, like you said, to email it, but I prefer a hard copy as well for my own personal
Yeah.
use.
And that's exactly the point, right? Like you've got to know what you're going to be able to do, keep, maintain. The thing we don't recommend is having a few paper ones, a few digital ones, and then you don't know where everything's at, right? So being able to have it all in one place. And so here, keeping a daily record. And this could seem a little daunting, but think of it like a diary where you're mentioning each day how you felt. And the reason being, I don't know if you've ever experienced this for all of us. You go to the doctor, maybe you've been having a headache, and they're like, "Where have you been feeling the pain?" And you're so in the pain in the moment, you're like, I don't know, maybe here, maybe here. And we're not really sure because if we were in pain in the moment, it feels really intense in the moment, and then afterwards we don't always remember. So here's a really great example of making these notes so that you can start to see the trend yourself, but also so that you can present so maybe your healthcare team might see the trends. So, example, I was feeling good in the morning at 2 p.m. I suddenly felt like a bus hit me. My bones ached, my head hurt, and it was unable to understand what I was reading. So there's like how it impacted. I had to lie down due to severe dizziness. I had to cancel my 3 p.m. meeting, close my eyes to help, slept for 30 minutes to return to work at 4, groggy until bedtime. It was double like the severity than I had yesterday and the pain in my head. And so then they rated it a 7 out of 10. Happened after lunch, 15 minutes in sauna. So really documenting, those are details we probably won't remember 3 months from now. right? But we can start to see the trends of what was happening. This is going to help us to understand. Could have been something we ate. It could have been a stress induced. It could have been light hitting your eyes a certain way. And these are very minor things that could cause it, just as examples.
Yeah, and in this particular example, right, it happened after lunch and 15 minutes after sauna.
Yeah.
The heat could be a trigger, right? So that could be a real big clue for potential multiple sclerosis, which is very heat sensitive. So those types of details really will help clue you in, even if you think they're insignificant, right? The the pattern shows itself over time.
Yes, yes, indeed. And so here again, just some of those is time of day, onset, impact of daily living. So this is also another important thing is eventually if you are needing disability, you're going to need to prove that it's impacting your daily ability. So all of these things are going to be super important to log. Comparing to prior episodes, rate pain levels and locations, noticing those potential triggers, and then did you do anything that was able to help? In this instance, this person took a nap and it seemed to help. And again, paper or digital. And then your medication list. We did have this happen with a family member. Multiple doctors were prescribing medication. The pharmacist caught it before he took it, but it was a potentially deadly reaction between two medications. So having those lists, especially if you're taking more than one, which I feel like most people do nowadays, being able to state not only how much you're taking, when you're typically taking it. For many medications, taking the medication at the same time every day is very important. And so you'd want to bring this to every doctor's appointment, making sure that everyone knows. Again, another one I definitely keep in my notes section of my phone with mine and all of the kids' medications all listed in one spot. And then again, know your place on the dosage. So this is not only how much the dosage is, but is it on the lower end of the spectrum or is it on the higher end? And then with some medications, and this is something you can definitely ask your doctor, taking a I always butcher this word, pharmacogenomic testing when it's appropriate. And I have had one of my kiddos have had to do that.
And I'll echo that the value of that. When those first started, they were not, people didn't know what to do with them. They didn't know how to interpret the data, but that is significantly improved. And it has saved on my children a significant amount of trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
And really, none of the drugs that were tested for her ADHD worked. And so we knew not to even go down that path. It was just not going to be effective. So we considered it's eventually what pushed us to go forward into one of the therapies that we tried in Canada for my daughter, which I've mentioned. So those are very valuable and very reliable now, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. And that is actually what helped us finally figure out which medication worked for my son. And there are some ADHD medications that can cause Tourette's. So they
Mhm.
also have to watch those things too. All right. So as we went over last week, we talked about the lifestyle, the biological, the neurological worksheets, and gathering those medical records from pre and post incidents. So you should have all of this data now, and if you haven't, it's okay. There's plenty of time to catch up. Another workbook that we are introducing this week, and so this is in the portal, is the health tracker, which was a lot of things that we talked about today. So the symptoms diary, listing your medications, knowing your appointments. So it's just some basic spreadsheets if you'd like to print those out. That way you could use those to help track. Preparing for your appointments. So it's a great thing to set an agenda for your meeting. You're having a meeting with your healthcare team or a provider, and we really want to be clear before we go into the meeting to make those notes, write those questions, being prepared for a meeting, just like we would any other meeting. So define those clear healthcare goals and being prepared in advance if needed. So maybe you need to collect a little bit of information. Maybe you need to look and see when that last test was, and then share the health data proactively. Maybe you went and visited a specialist and you want to make sure that your doctor has that available. Maybe it's not in my chart or something of that nature. Be polite but firm for clarity. So sometimes doctors unintentionally will start using a lot of medical jargon. And if you're not clear about a certain term or a certain phrase or explanation, ask for a clearer explanation. Say, hey, could you put that in layman's terms? Could you say that a little more simple so that I could understand it? And then confirm the follow-up plan. Sometimes it can be awkward to repeat stuff back, but just saying, hey, I just wanted to make sure I heard that correctly. I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and make sure that you heard, because sometimes repeating those things back, we can catch if there's a discrepancy. And an optional is you can email ahead. Some of these apps, or sometimes the nurses at the front desk, they might have the ability to be able to email them ahead of time.
In most cases today, most physicians have electronic portals where you can easily go in and ask questions beforehand. And if you are really looking, especially if you're trying to get their opinion on certain interventions you're interested in, right? Or really changing and introducing something that has not been discussed before, I think it is a really good idea to give that healthcare provider time in advance to do some research, to get some information so that you can use that meeting to your advantage and take advantage of that in-person engagement. You will always get more in person than you will after you're out of the office. So make sure that you strategically leverage that for any uh, deeper conversations that you want to have his or her opinion on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're part of the care team, maybe you're the care provider. If you can have those discussions with your partner or your loved one ahead of time, so then that way you know what to ask and advocate for them. And in this case, if you are the person, bring that backup person, right? If you are in pain, if you're sick, if you're not feeling well, having a caretaker for you or a friend or family member come in and help make sure that you don't forget questions if that's something that you easily do. I know I do. If I don't have it written down, and sometimes I'll even forget that piece of paper because I'm just so in the moment. So maybe it's bringing that person with you to help ask. And don't downplay your symptoms. This is common, right? Like we don't want to be considered weak sometimes, or we're just so used to it that we don't think it's such a big deal. But that's why that symptoms tracker is going to be super important. So be honest, don't downplay the symptoms, use the symptoms journal, and then be specific. So impact patterns, triggers, frequency, location, severity, these things all matter. And if you can bring those to your appointment, you're providing data to the healthcare team. So this was one for me, especially. I used to get headaches a whole lot, and being able to say exactly where the headache was super important for the care team. Now, this does happen. So sometimes we get dismissed. Be curious with the conversation prompts. Ask for clarity in simple language. And we have some prompts here too. If you continue to ask and you're not getting the support that you need, we always want to make sure that we're asking the right questions first. And then if we're not getting that support, go get a second opinion. Find another person. So we do have an additional resource. So if you're feeling dismissed, questions that you can ask, processes that you can take to help support you. And so that's going to be in this workbook here. So that's self-advocacy discussion prompts. All right. Do we have any questions here before we move into our next section? Nope, we're feeling good.
think we're good, Izzy.
All right. Well, Sherry, it's
No,
time for you
I
to take
I
it away.
do, but I can't find the hand.
Oh, no problem.
Okay,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Bridget.
Bridget.
So, emailing ahead from the point of view of a first session that we had with a neurologist, he didn't read any of the information. And when we arrived, it was a case of, well, what are you here for, basically?
Mm,
And I said, I'd emailed a whole heap of stuff ahead. He said, oh, I never look at that stuff because people sometimes don't show up.
Mm,
So that was one of the things that he gave me the information on that. We did turn around and just tell him he didn't have, as you said now, partner mindset, but we were looking for a team to work with, and we just eventually just walked out. And we let him know that he was incredibly intimidating and fierce, and he was scary. So we were able to actually tell him that. And he changed a modest amount during the session, but it probably would have been quite hard for him to hear because he certainly wouldn't have been expecting someone to own up to that effect that he had had on us.
And I'm
So
so
did you
glad that you,
you ended up staying with him, Bridget? Sorry, Izzy.
No, of course not.
You did yeah, okay.
We checked out big time,
and they
and
need that feedback,
we
right?
went back and told the GP about the
Mm.
behavior as well.
And that's fantastic, right? That's how they change. And I'm equally reminded of Gary Whitaker on our summit
Yeah.
last week, right? His neurologist knew nothing about neuroplasticity. He decided to stick with him because he was open-minded about it and heard about it. And after he ended up becoming a partner, and Gary ended up educating him on the
Yes.
process of
Wonderful.
it. Yeah, so
Wonderful.
it can go both ways. There's the full
Yeah.
spectrum of how it can turn out.
And that's
Mm.
exactly why we included this, because this happens, right? And Bridget, you and your husband are so lucky that you have that fierceness along with you as well to be able to speak up, right? Because there are so many people that don't. There's so many people that just they passively sit by, and they don't get the help that they need. And so this is part of that self-advocacy is being able to speak up, being able to find your voice, for your loved one or yourself, and being able to say those things because that's the only way that doctor is going to get better.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Bridget.
Yeah.
Okay, so the key message I would want to look at as we go through this workshop that we've prepared is personalized, right? Because we've talked about neuroplasticity, we know that neuroplasticity is unique to each individual brain, and so therefore any recovery process, any type of action plan that you develop going forward has to be personalized. And so I want you to please keep that in mind as we go forward. And Izzy, I don't, sorry, I'm not seeing thank you. So this is actually the first time that we've pulled this sort of action plan on how to develop an action plan together. So I'm hoping it's going to take us around 30 minutes to get through it. But if you will bear with us and give us maybe a few extra minutes at the end, it would be appreciated. I've got a couple of reminders for you to sort of set the stage around what neuroplasticity is and how it works. And then we're going to go through the blueprint tool, and then we're going to walk through the process step by step using a fictional character, Jane D, uh, who is really a composite of individuals that I have helped over the time frame. So the first reminder is that your mindset really changes your brain's chemistry, and how you think about this really matters. So if you believe, you have to really believe that you have the power to change, that you're empowered, that neuroplasticity can work and will work, and that you can manipulate it to create the brain that you want. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, nor does it mean it's going to be straightforward and simple. nor does it mean you may not reach your entire full goal, but it does mean that you have hope. And that hope is really a key foundation principle because if you recognize that the brain can change and that your current state is not your permanent destination, then that really will shift your entire belief system. And that provides the biological fuel for internal motivation. If you view yourself as the architect and not as the patient, that mindset and using that to choose specific thoughts, behaviors, and environments that you put yourself in will literally change the brain's chemistry. And whatever you think is what you are engineering for your brain. So that creates the blueprint. So you need to be proactive about the what you choose and be the architect rather than the patient. The third point I wanted to remind you of was the power of mental rehearsal. It amplifies your ability to accelerate your recovery because not only going through the effort, but visualizing that adds almost an equal level of effort. So it's about 70% of what it's equal to about 70% of the doing the actual physical activity. You get 70% of that benefit, and you are actively rewiring those neural pathways. So if you're not able to do that exercise, visualize it. You will get some of the benefit there. Your mind is a very strong and powerful tool, and that visualization also creates that same chemistry. And you can view yourself as and put your body in a situation where it's primed for growth rather than seeing yourself as stuck in the stress response. So it helps you to remove the stress, which is a detractor for neuroplasticity. And then lastly, this is not something we've actually really talked about before, but the more I think about this, the more I really see the value of using your recovery to help you reach your full potential. You're going through this process, right? You're architecting your end result here. So we talk a lot about salience, which is doing the things that matter to you. So if salience is that important of a tool on the physical side, it's got to be a very important part to the mental side. So using your passions and your strengths, the things that you enjoy doing as part of your recovery process and weaving them in where you can, not only creates joy, but you are making progress towards those goals as part of your recovery. So you're not stuck, you're moving forward, maybe in a different direction. And it also fills your life with hope and joy, putting your brain in that happy mental state. So the mental part of neuroplasticity is equally as important in my mind as the physical part of what we do. We've talked a lot about the physical part, but I really wanted to emphasize the mental part here for you. Next slide, Izzy, please. And then lastly, just as we go through this blueprint and you think about what you want to do, just a quick reminder on what diminishes and what promotes neuroplasticity. I'm sure you all pretty much know this by now, right? The lifestyle is your most important toolkit. You need 180 minutes of movement and exercise. A keto flex diet is what's recommended. You add to that supplements and you need to reduce and remove any toxins. You also got to manage the stress piece. In the example of Jane D, you'll see how stress played a big role at it. And any type of trauma in your life or a negative mindset really does affect your ability to change. So be proactive about that. Figure out what you like to do and work those mindfulness practices in place. Think about the positive outlook of where you're going, maybe not where you're at right now, but where you're going. Sleep, we know how important that is. And then cognitive stimulation. You need that cognitive stimulation and novelty. Prioritize your in-person engagement over digital when you can, and try to learn something new monthly, and change your daily habits. This one I think is super fun because you can just weave it in any little thing. Drink your coffee with your left hand instead of your right hand. Decide you're going to cook a very different type of cuisine for a month. Try one new recipe a week. Read a book that's in a different genre. When you go up the stairs and you typically put your right foot on as the one that goes first to lift yourself, try using your left foot. Walk backwards when you walk a little bit. These little simple things really do create that novelty and promote neuroplasticity. So, as you think about our workshop and the actions and you're building your plan, be sure to weave that in a way that makes it fun for you. Okay, so now here to the nitty gritty, the 7-step process. Um, we've talked about all of these steps throughout the last 3 weeks. Izzy talked about the advocacy component, which is woven throughout each of these steps today in detail. But what I really want to do is walk you through how you do this for your specific situation. Remember our conversation around personalization as we kick this session off. So I I'm gonna this slide really is for you to take as you go on your own, but I'm gonna walk through each of these steps as we go through it. So number one, know your own story. We haven't talked a little bit about this. I don't. We've talked about it in a general sense, but not in a very direct way. You need to thoroughly analyze your life story before and after whatever onset of situation there is. And so let's walk through that. So I want to introduce you to Jane Doe. She is going to be the individual, our fictional individual that, as I mentioned, I've developed over. It's a composite of individuals that I've helped over the years. She's currently 64 years old. She's divorced. She lives in Southern Indiana. She was a late to walk and speak individual when she was born, clumsy, ambidextrous, meaning she could use both in her left hand and her right hand equally, but she ended up becoming left-handed. She was a three-sport athlete in high school, which tells me that she overcame that clumsiness and any of those little neurological delays she had at the beginning. And she was certainly very intellectually capable because she got a 3.8 GPA and her interests were in forestry. She was a very outdoor active person. She even climbed Kilimanjaro. She had 2 healthy kids, normal deliveries, frequent international travel, a fantastic career, highly social. Life was moving along very, very smoothly until she got into her mid 50s. She got divorced at 51, which was very difficult for her. Her career was still on track. She continued to be an avid hiker, but around her mid 50s, she started to develop very stiff joints, specifically in her knees, and severe pain, which caused her to really stop doing a lot of the hiking and outdoor activities that she loves so much. She ended up having to go on pain medication for to help manage the stiffness during certain times of her life. It forced her to move to an office job when she was about 56. She ended up retiring at age 62 because she couldn't meet the physical demands of the job that she had had prior, which was spent a lot of time out in the field. She did have Bell's palsy at 54. If you don't know what Bell's palsy is, you will notice usually one side of your face droops. You lose the ability to move the muscles in your face and neck and head. It typically resolves on its own and is usually triggered by some sort of a virus. They don't know what causes it, but it is neurological in its origin. And she had untreated high cholesterol, which was sort of on the borderline. It was high, but on the borderline. She chose not to take statins for it. And she had some emerging cognitive fog. So slow, a little bit of slow processing, but not anything that really affected her day-to-day life. By the time she had reached her 60s, she was about 28 pounds overweight, but she still loved her activities. She swam 3 times a week. She met her 180-minute a week goal with that. She was an accomplished sketch artist. She loved sketching nature. She couldn't go out and hike, so she was taking that and turned it into sketching. And she had a very good career as a USDA consultant for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Um, even though she had to move to a desk job, she was able to continue to be very financially sound on her own. So at about age 64, she had a stroke. It was ischemic stroke, and it was about 6 months ago. Her symptoms from this stroke are dysphagia, which means she can't swallow. It's the involuntary swallowing. So she had a feeding tube for quite some time. That feeding tube was removed. She still has significant left side weakness, and control issues of controlling her limb. She does shuffle. She can walk now. She shuffles. She uses a cane or a rollator to walk, depending on her situation. She has vertigo and dizziness. Her cognitive decline has continued to increase, although it's still she's still relatively sharp and was able to not continue working, but to do her daily activities and pay her bills and be somewhat independent at this point. She was 10 pounds underweight at this point because she was on a liquid diet and because of the stress of the stroke, and she's developed some depression. She before that was quite outgoing individual, very social. Most of her friends were with work at this point, and they were international because she did a lot of international travel with conservation areas. She was traveling to many different countries and back and forth to Africa quite a bit. So at this point now, after 2 months in the hospital, 2 months with her family, which is living nearby, she is back home. She's no longer able to swim because she doesn't have use of her left side or hand. She does live alone, but as I said, her family is nearby and supportive. She does have financial means, but she has all of her physical therapy has now run out and she's discontinued that, so she's not moving. Okay, so that is her background. That's her before and her after. What does this mean? Why do I care about all of this information? So it's good to compare what this person was like before and what after. And it also gives us clues as to what else could be at play here. Because many times when you've had an issue like a TBI or a stroke, if there are other residual issues, those will significantly impact the recovery. And you want to understand what those are and try to track them down. You also will get clues on what that person enjoys and likes. So again, how do we weave that joy and those strengths and passions back into the recovery process? And this is you taking a look at your life, right? Or as a caregiver, taking a look at the person, your loved one's life, and trying to connect the dots. So what this tells me when I look at it is that this individual has had neurological challenges all her life. She was very slow to develop from a speaking standpoint. She was ambidextrous, which often means that the neurology is trying to decide, is she going to be right-handed or left-handed? And that typically means that it's not solidified and solid in its direction. And it can be used as a strength for sure, but that does give us some clues. She also had Bell's palsy, right, at 54, which is a neurological issue. And then there's this knee stiffness and pain, which says she's got a lot of inflammation. There was no injury. It just was almost sudden onset. So that all together tells me that there is something else in her life that happened before the stroke that could have led and helped exacerbate the stroke, or it could be completely unrelated, but it will likely impact her recovery ability. The divorce at 51 also tells me that she had that at 51. Then she started having the knee stiffness and the Bell's palsy at 54 shortly thereafter. That tells me that stress was a big trigger for her. I would, and in talking to her, I knew that that was the case, but it shows up in the data here. She had a very hard time managing that. And I do think that the stress played a significant role in the onset of these other issues for her. She was very active and very physically and mentally active. So that also tells me that she's got a good physical and mental reserve there despite the stroke. She's determined and she's probably going to be a hard worker. So it's okay to maybe push her a little bit more than it would be someone else who hasn't built up that reserve. And all of these things together really sort of would make me think, okay, there's some sort of Lyme disease or parasite or virus here because she's traveled internationally, the Bell's palsy, the joint stiffness, sudden onset, all of that tells me that there's probably something besides just a physical issue here that is becoming a trigger. And so next slide, Izzy. So thank you. So I think that is a very detailed analysis of what I would go through and what you should go through. And what we've done here is just sort of put in this influencing neuroplasticity blueprint workbook. Izzy's now got that ready and is available for you, which is going to sort of walk you through all of this information, very much like we have done in the other workbooks. But you need to take a good look, be your own private investigator, go through, analyze your life as if it's someone looking from the outside. And that might be very hard. You may have to have someone else help you with that. It's difficult because uh, you can make excuses for why certain things, but you need to just step back and do that remote and look at what happened before, what happened after, how those two fit. And don't forget to look at your family dynamics, your career dynamics, and your hobbies and where you spend your time in your environment. All of those things really affect your story. Okay, so that was part one. Part two is knowing your neurological profile. We talked a lot about that last week. So what I want to do is just walk you through an example, Jane's example, and show you how um, you should think about that and give you some clues. So what I've done here is created a fictional MRI report so we can take a look at it. And if you haven't seen an MRI report, a cognitive report, or something that is assessing neurological status, it is very, very jargon heavy. It is a very medical term intense. And so you want to really break down and make sure you see and look at all of the different individual terms and know how these different terms and the areas of the brain that are affected relate to your symptoms. So in her situation, she had a subacute chronic infarct in the right middle cerebral artery, and that involved the right primary motor cortex and cortical tract, persistent left hemiparesis, and gait disturbance. Okay, so all of that is very scientific. It's not words we use on a regular basis. And if you're not familiar, this is going to seem intimidating, but we want to get past that and move forward. So these are just examples. And then on this last part here, um, the clinical correlation, the patient is clinically stable with no radiographic evidence of progression or new acute findings. So she's stable, right? Functional status shows modest improvement in activities of daily living, with the patient now able to dress herself independently despite residual motor deficits. Overall, the patient is unlikely to recover further because this has taken 6 months over. And what's the standard belief? That at 6 months, you've now reached your plateau and you won't continue to recover further. All right, next slide. So we're going to break this down so we take away the intimidation. All right. So the way I would look at this, and I teach individuals to do this, and I do this myself because I didn't go to medical school. I have to be constantly reminded, what do these areas of the brain do? How do they interact and relate to these individual symptoms? So the first one here, subacute chronic, what does that word, those mean? Subacute, issues last 4 weeks to 3 months. Chronic extends beyond 3 months. So we know that these conditions have continued beyond 3 months. All right. Infarct, what does that word mean? tissue damage or death. So there's been damage or death in the brain in these areas, which are the right middle cerebral artery. So where is that? Why does it matter? This is your brain's right hemisphere. Okay, so the right side of your brain. The area controls the left side of the body, often causing left-sided weakness, which is known as hemiparesis. Hemi meaning half, paresis is paralysis. It causes spatial neglect or vision changes. Okay, so what are Jane's symptoms that correlate with this? She does have left-sided weakness, and she does have some dizziness, which can be associated with this spatial neglect and vision. All right, so now we know that this issue and the damage in this side of the brain is causing and related to these symptoms that she's having. And we would just continue on down through this. So right primary motor cortex and corticospinal tract. This is the brain's command center and pathways for controlling voluntary movement on the left side of the body. The system sends signals to the brain down to the spinal cord to move your limbs, with the right side controlling the left side. So the right side of your brain controlling the left side of your body. All right, this correlates with left-sided weakness. And then we get down to the right insular cortex and frontal operculum. So these are neighboring structures on the right side of the brain involved in processing taste, pain, emotion, and bodily awareness. Interoception, meaning where you are in space, and in regulating the pharyngeal, which is your involuntary phase, and swallowing. Okay, bingo, right? Here is where we're having, if we've got our symptoms, all of our symptoms here are very much aligned with what the damage in this part of the brain. So why is this important? Why do you need to go through this detail? First, you need to understand where the damage in your brain is and how that relates to your symptoms so that you can get to the root cause of what your challenge is, figure out which interventions and treatment are more likely to be effective. So understanding this yourself is going to help you in every stage of the process going forward. So it's very important for you to understand these terms. And here, Google is your friend. AI is your friend, right? You can put this into AI in Google, and you should back check it. AI is not always right, but in my experience, I have put this in and I'll double check it in different areas, but AI is pretty much right on the spot. And if you ensure where you get your information from is a reliable source, when the response that Google or AI brings you back, because it always puts their sources in, then you can, in general, trust this. It'll get you really started down the right path. But this is a very important first step. So this also is important because it tells you what additional testing you might need neurologically. Next slide, please, Izzy. Okay, so on the testing piece, and we're gonna come to the treatments later down the path, but as we look at what Jane had done, what that report said, and if we're trying to figure out what is the root cause or what additional information do we need to help find and refine the core root cause of the damage, we need to assess if more testing is needed. And this is where you really need to go and get multiple perspectives from different types of providers, because the way our healthcare system works is pretty much a siloed approach, unfortunately. The occupational therapist, the speech therapist, the physical therapist, the neurologist, they're all thinking about it and from a very different perspective, and what they might attest that they might find valuable, one of the others may not find very valuable. But when I looked at those results, right, I was like, well, is there a physical reason why he thinks the dysphagia has reached a plateau? Because she was on a feeding tube. She's now able to have a liquid diet. She was eating 5 to 6 times a day. She doesn't have an issue processing the food. Her appetite was there. She just had to conscientiously swallow. The involuntary swallow function was not working, but she was able to focus and swallow. So that says to me that um, there's hope there. Something's working. We just need to continue to refine it and see if there's anything else that can help it. So, I know that Vivistem actually, that should not say Vivistem. It's VitalStem for Vivistem. Oh, it does say VitalStem. Okay, good. Sorry, misread that. Vivistem is the vagus nerve, but VitalStem is this pharyngeal electric stimulation technology that is out now. It's been out for many years. So I was wondering, has that been tried? Why was physical therapy stopped when she had been making so much progress? So I would that raises some questions for me. An additional testing is this diffusion tensor imaging with tractography. This quantifies the corticospinal tract and integrity. So how significant was the damage? And that will tell you whether or not the how much potential for recovery does she have uh, based on the results of that test? The functional MRI, this is a fantastic tool, especially for motor issues and dysphagia. It will actually give you and help you pinpoint where the physical issues are, the damage is. And then MoCA for cognition. Given her cognition has gotten worse, she had it before the stroke. We need to test and see, figure out where she is on that spectrum and figure out where how how much damage she has, and is she, leaning towards dementia, or how early in the process is she? Okay, next slide, Izzy. So those would be my recommendations, but what you need to do is ask your care providers what other test, and ask them if they can't remember back in Izzy's advocacy, if they can't prescribe the test, or they don't want to prescribe the test, ask them who can, right? And then go talk to that person. Okay, so step 3, decoding your biological profile. So we did the neurological, now we're going to do the biological. And I want to share with you, let's see, Izzy, can I have share capability, please? Okay. Mm, okay, bear with me. I'm trying to find it.
I'm going to share the Apollo Health.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Izzy. Okay, if you have not had a blood test done before, I mean, everybody's probably had a blood taken at some point, right? But have you actually sat down and looked at your blood panel? What I've done here is created, again, a fictional blood panel for Jane Doe. And this is using the basic information that's requested in an Apollo Health Recode panel. It's not completely comprehensive, but this is the basics of what you would get. So your inflammation and inflammation markers. So in Jane Doe's results, very high CRP, very high SAG rate, and because of her history, they went ahead and tested her for Lyme, and she did have some positive reaction to that. Only 3 out of the 10, but it was positive reaction. Very high CRP and SAD rate. This means her body has a lot of inflammation, which is probably very related to the joint stiffness and some of the other cognitive issues, probably the entire set of symptoms she has. So they do metabolic test. This is your insulin. She's pre-diabetic, as you can see from the results here. This is her cholesterol panel. Again, out of range, high. her nutritional and methylation markers. We did go ahead and test her for the MTHFR because of her her neurological deficiencies that is often very correlated with this gene mutation. And she was positive, right, for that. So she does have that issue. So she can't process B vitamins, which often affects your energy level. So those were those results. We did a hormone and thyroid panel on her. Her thyroid, her TSH came back high. Her free T3 came back low. Her DHEA came back low. So she's definitely got some hormone issues. And some of the other tests that they did were zinc and magnesium, because that's also a very common issue. And she was low in both of those. And she tested positive for the APOE4 gene allele. She had one of those. So this is just really to kind of give you an idea of the report, what you will get. It typically flags if there's an issue and and what the ranges are. And so these ranges are important. And as Izzy mentioned, I think in week 3, that those ranges, a lot of them now are under contest because of how they were developed so long ago. And so you can have a conversation. If you're borderline and close to that, then have a conversation. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. We'll go back. Thank you, Izzy. All right, so that was this biological report. This is just here a summary, if you will, of all of the things that we need to address. And so then the next step would to take those issues, map them to your symptoms. Does it correlate? Do these issues and the impact of these issues relate to the symptoms that you're having? Yes or no? Where, how much? What's the overlap? So you can see that the Lyme disease really is very highly correlated to joint pain and stiffness, to cognitive decline, and it's also very much related to her thyroid issues, and it also causes issues with swallowing. Uh, there's a very high correlation with that as well. Vitamin B, D, zinc and magnesium are almost all of these. So what does this tell me? Okay, these issues need to be addressed because they're related to almost all of the individual symptoms that she has. There's multiple overlap in the symptoms with these issues. So it's something that not probably, it needs to be a priority. Next slide. So what additional testing is needed now? We've gotten our report, we've read it. What additional information do we need? We know that the Lyme disease, she's positive 3 out of 10. We need to get further evaluation on that. We know that the Bell's palsy is often triggered by some sort of virus. And so that would lead me to believe that she's got some additional viruses in her system that could be causing neurological challenges. Epstein-Barr is one that comes to mind. She traveled significantly outside of the country. That's another reason why I think we need to do a full panel workup on her for the viruses and parasites. She needs some advanced nutrition testing because of her she's low on all of those indicators that we tested, but also because her diabetes and inflammation and her feeding tube her liquid diet issues, right? So we need a very specific, detailed analysis of her nutritional needs so we can get her diet and energy addressed and work on that inflammation. I would have, in this, I would also suggest food tolerances because if you typically have a thyroid issue that comes with food intolerances, and they did not test for thyroid antibodies in this, so that needs to be tested as well, and to see if she's got Hashimoto's, if it's an autoimmune issue, or if it's related maybe to the Lyme disease and the cholesterol, which is very ticked and tied. So these are the things you should um, think through and or at least bring up and point out to your doctor. But this again, this is Jane Doe's. You have to look at your specific situation and see what pops out. That's why information is king. You've got to know what the root cause of these are. All right. Next step 4 is assessing your lifestyle. We've talked so much about this. Izzy, next slide, please. I don't think that there's a lot more to go into. We've talked each week about this. These are the things that Jane I felt like needed to do. And a thing I want to point out here is how I've woven in her preferences and what brings her joy. So on the emotional and stress management, that's a very key piece for her because we know her coping skills are somewhat not where they need to be, given on how her divorce impacted her. And so watching nature documentaries, if she can't get out in nature, watching that would probably give her some peace. Gardening in with either indoor plants or out if she can get into that. Tai Chi, which is often done outside, those small movements help manage her stress, but also gives her exercise at the same time. She can do that with her rollator. Chair yoga, she can do that. That was something she was interested in. And bird watching. So that is another. She can do that from indoors, from sitting outside. It's back in nature, and that leverages her strengths and joy and gives her some skills that she can continue to build on. Um, Her mental stimulation really had tanked. And so she needs to work on that. The brain training, we recommended that, and in-person engagement where possible. So spend time with her grandkids, reconnect with those individuals from work that she maybe had lost touch with, and try to reinvigorate some new relationships that she can take advantage of. But this again is personal to you. Take this as your opportunity to restructure your lifestyle so that it helps you accomplish the goals you're really looking forward to. Um, you were looking forward to doing before your incident and onset. Next slide, please. Okay, I've combined steps 5 and 6 here because I really do think it's almost very difficult to separate them. But why I broke them out into separate steps is that as you're researching and selecting therapies, you're also contemplating how beneficial they will be, right? You can't do one without the other, but it's very valuable. You have to step back after you've gone through and said, okay, all of these therapies should be on the table. Let me evaluate. They work. I know that they are have shown to be effective, but now let me go through and evaluate them for me specifically and then prioritize them. So we still need to go back and do that at the end. Next slide. Okay, so when we looked at Jane, one of the things, well, before I look at Jane specifically, sorry, this is really what you need to consider when you are building out your particular um, evaluation list. So if you take that neurological matrix that we had, that navigation matrix, we talked about that last week. It's got, motor, mental, and I've forgotten what the other two columns are, but they each targeted intervention that you can evaluate has the symptoms that you can also map to. So when you go through and you look at that, you want to come back and say, okay, what are my symptom priorities? Which of these are going to be effective? What risks do they have? Is it going to is one of these going to impact the ability to do the other intervention? So maybe there's two interventions, and in Jane's situation, that actually was the case. Is insurance going to pay for it? Am I going to be able to get there? How do I have the ability to comply with these therapies? if they do work. So those are some of the considerations you need to take into account when you're evaluating these therapies. And like the biological, like the neurological test, you've got to get multiple opinions on these um, because it's just different perspectives, and you really need to consider the order in which you do them. So that even though there might be two that could be similarly effective, what's the right order? Okay, next slide. So basically what I've done in these next couple of slides is funnel down. I've shown you sort of the process that we went through for Jane. We funneled down all of the therapy options that there were that could work, right? So, and I did this by symptom. So what from a general plasticity, what is it on that list that could work to improve her plasticity and improve our overall brain structure? These were the therapies that came out for that. For movement, I did the same activity. For cognition, for her dysphagia, depression, pain, and dizziness, I just went down the list. I put them all in here and then started to research those and then whittled it down. Next slide. And here is a priority list for that. So priority 1 is orange, priority 2 is blue, and priority 3 is the dark blue. And how did I prioritize these? I used that list that we had on 2 slides previous, right? So what's going to have the biggest impact? What is going to be closest to me? How much is it going to cost? Do I think one is going to be more effective? Can I get more than one of these at the same location? So simplicity. And what we decided for Jane was that even though her Lyme treatment impacted so much of her symptoms, it is the Lyme treatment is so difficult to go through and knocks you down physically so much to go through that process that we needed to wait on that one. We felt like because she had such resilience in her mental and physical strength, and that if we could get the dysphagia addressed and get her moving, that would likely address her depression, a lot of her pain, probably overcome the dizziness, and improve her cognition. So those were the priority. Vivastim, as I mentioned, we felt like and that's that vagus nerve stimulation, but it's pairing with other therapies like the constraint-induced therapy to be effective. And that takes some time to do that. So we wanted to go ahead and start the PT, which is either doing it locally or remote. We mentioned PhysioFix during the summit that I think has a great remote program. But ultimately, we decided not to do that, not to use PhysioFix here, but because we wanted to pursue Vivastim, we found a neurologist who could do that and give us the neuro rehab all in one place. And they also had the Katsu that was there, but we weren't sure if Katsu would work with the vagus nerve stimulation. So we put that in a second priority, as well as the external robot for the hand, because we thought the Vivastim might work there as well. So that was the thought process there. So we now have these prioritized options. We're going to come back to this at a later date as we reiterate and reassess, as we do that every 6 months, or more frequently as needed. So next slide. So the next whittling down then is developing. We've got our priorities, what treatments we want to do. We've got our 30-day action plan. So then we take that and we make it much more specific. And what I want to say here is stress that simplicity is king, because if you're recovering from an incident, your energy level is typically going to be low. You're relying on other people to help care for you, and you've really got to make the most of your time and your effort. So you want to look and see, where can I overlap these therapies? Where can I find one provider who maybe not is like the top there, but in one specific area, but knows how to do both and could possibly work. And that is a personal decision. the whittling down of where to focus, and the 30-day action plan has to be unique to you. So for her general plasticity, we said the nutritionist is bar one. That's got to be done immediately. We've got to do and complete all the follow-up blood work because the nutritionist is going to need that. We need to put in these 2 mindfulness practices weekly because the stress of healing is a lot, and we need to be cognizant of that. And while we don't want to do the Lyme treatment right now, we wanted to start interviewing Lyme treatment specialists to find one that fits, because they're not unfortunately there's still not a lot of them around that understand how to treat that well, and it may require some remote travel for that. And as I said, it does take a lot out of you, so we wanted to help build her strength up beforehand. On the movement and Vivistem paired with the rehab, as I said, to kind of find one neurologist who can do all of that locally so that she can get started with them, get to know the process, and then as she gets ready for Vivistem, which is surgical implant, she has her network already developed and her processes and habits, and they know her well. On the cognition, it's immediately important to develop the MoCA score and get started on some brain training. And then the dysphagia, start with the vital stem immediately as well. And so that is her 30-day action plan. And this is what yours should look like when you're done. This is what I want you to be able to walk away with. And so I hope that describing this process has been helpful. Next slide. And then next slide, Izzy. It's really just implement and repeat. This is your process. Every 6 months, you should take a look at where you are and evaluate that. It takes a lot of time and effort to get your appointments, to go through this, to be able to see some benefit. It takes typically 2 months before you start to see some real benefit. So it is, I think about every 6 months or 3 months, depending on how quickly you're progressing, is the right timeline for that. And then update your action plan. Keep that updated so you can say, okay, what should I be doing today? I don't feel full of energy today, but here's 1 or 2 things on that action plan I can take care of. Next slide. And then that's it. That kind of brings us to a close on that. Are there any questions on that? And thank you for sticking with us. I know that that took a little bit longer than the 30 minutes. And it's a lot. I know that it is also a lot. Any questions? No? Okay. Well, if you do have questions after and you want to reach out and you're not sure how to use the tools, please do reach out to Izzy or myself.
Yes, there's a question, Sherry. So,
Oh,
what
great.
is the pharma? And I again butcher this word.
Pharmacogenic. Yeah,
Pharmacogenic.
so
Yes.
pharmacogenic is it's a biological test to see how your body, your DNA will react with the active ingredients in the pharmaceuticals. So, a lot of people do this for ADHD because those medications all work very differently, SSRIs. And you want to know whether your body is going to be well suited for that. I had to do that for both of my children, and I will tell you it was a godsend because um well, and my daughter, no medications were going to work. We need to bypass it. And my son, it really pinpointed because we needed to kind of do something quickly. And it helped us save time.
Perfect. Thank you. And these resources are within the portal, and I'm going to put that QR code up again in just a moment. But just to let you know, this is another item that's in the portal is resources. And so we have a list of experts. It's not all of them, but it's some key ones to start following and maybe reading some of their work, which there's also recommended readings. And each month right now we have a different book that we're discussing. And so you can join us. You don't have to read the book. You can just come join the discussion, as these are very much things that we can discuss about life and how to apply them. So this next one, it's on the first Tuesday of the month, is Good Anxiety. So we're looking forward to talking about that. And here's that QR code so that you can go to the portal and access that. So you can go directly to our website, the npallies.org. And in the events tab, there is at the bottom a program list. And so you can go to it the back way as well. I'll leave that up for just a moment. And if you have any questions, sometimes it happens, questions come to mind an hour, a day later. Feel free to email me, and Sherry and I will get an answer back to you. And then just how to stay engaged. So there's the website right there for you as well. You can follow and share on social media. That helps further the message, the word that neuroplasticity is real, it is working, it is available. We could do the one-on-one discussions with Sherry. You can visit our website and check out our information. We just had a summit. If you did not attend, the replays are available. And then, of course, we always love donations to help support the cause.
Well, I think that is it, Izzy. Great
That's
job.
it.
Thank you so much. And don't forget that it's your brain to build. So be empowered, take action, and don't take no for an answer.
All right. And we hope to see you again. If you'd like to attend this series again, we'll be hosting again in July. We are also available to present to your organization or community as well. All right. Thank you
All right.
all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.